The sun was already high when Caleb rode across the wide desert, and the heat felt stronger than anything he had faced in weeks. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, glowing under the burning light. The air shimmered above the sand like waves rising from a fire. Even his horse, Dusty, walked slower than usual, lifting his hooves carefully as if the ground might burn him. Caleb wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and took a quiet breath. He had traveled this path many times, but he had never seen a day this hot. The sky had not a single cloud, and the wind that sometimes brought cool air was nowhere to be found. It felt like even the mountains in the distance were melting into the heat. Caleb had planned only to cross the desert and reach the small trading post before nightfall. He carried supplies, water, and a few tools in his saddlebags. He had no idea that this day would steer him into something he never expected, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He gently patted Dusty's neck and whispered, "Just a little more, boy. We'll rest when we reach the creek." But as they moved forward, he noticed something strange far ahead. There was a shape on the ground, lying in the open, not moving at all. At first, Caleb thought it might be a bundle of cloth or someone's belongings dropped by mistake. But as he rode closer, he felt a wave of concern rising inside him. The shape was too still, too quiet, and the sun was directly hitting it. He clicked his tongue gently, urging Dusty to speed up. The horse obeyed, picking up pace even with the heavy air pressing down on them. When Caleb finally reached the figure, he jumped off his horse with quick steps. What he saw made his chest tighten instantly. It was a young Apache woman, her skin flushed with heat, her dark hair stuck to her forehead, and her breathing fast and shallow. She looked like she had collapsed from the burning sun and had been lying there for too long. Her eyes were half open but unfocused, as if she couldn't see what was in front of her. Caleb knelt beside her and touched her wrist gently. Her skin was burning hot. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked softly, leaning closer so she could see his face. The woman's lips moved slightly, but no clear words came out. Caleb quickly grabbed his canteen and poured a little water onto his palm. He dabbed it on her forehead and cheeks, hoping it would help cool her down. She blinked slowly, her dry lips trembling. She tried to lift her arm, but it fell back weakly. She was exhausted, overheated, and dangerously dehydrated. Caleb could tell this was no ordinary tiredness. The signs of heat exhaustion were clear, and if she stayed out here much longer, she could faint completely or worse. He needed to help her immediately, and he needed to do it right. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder and spoke calmly, so she would not panic. "You're safe now. I'm here. I'm going to help you." The woman tried to speak again, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "Too hot," she breathed out, her words broken by weakness. She tried to tug at the fabric of her dress, the thick material meant for cooler nights, not this unbearable desert sun. She looked up at him with pleading eyes and managed to say, "It's too hot. Take my dress off." Caleb froze for a moment. Her voice was soft, desperate, exhausted, not suggesting anything improper. It was the genuine plea of a person who felt like she was burning alive. Her dress had several layers, and the outer one was made of heavy cloth, trapping heat around her body. She was asking for help, not in any wrong way, but simply because her body was overheating. Realizing this, Caleb made a quick decision. He had no time to hesitate. "All right," he replied firmly yet gently. "I understand. I'm going to help you cool down. Don't worry." He moved carefully, loosening only the thick outer layer of her dress while ensuring she remained fully covered and comfortable. He protected her dignity completely, focusing only on helping her breathe more easily. He lifted her slightly, sliding the heavy layer aside, and placed his coat over her legs to create shade. Her breathing eased just a little, and she let out a tiny sigh as if the burning air around her had finally lightened. Caleb took his hat and held it above her face to block more sunlight. Then he poured a few drops of water on her wrists, the back of her neck, and her temples, places he knew would help her cool faster. He didn't give her too much water at once. That could make her sick in her condition. Instead, he touched the canteen to her lips and let her sip slowly. Her throat moved weakly as she swallowed. Minutes passed. Each one felt long, heavy, and filled with worry. Dusty stood nearby, shifting his weight restlessly, as if sensing the tension. Caleb kept watching the woman closely, making sure she didn't lose consciousness. Her eyes began to focus more, and she looked at him again, her voice barely a breath. "Who are you?" "Just a traveler," Caleb answered softly. "You don't have to talk. Just rest. You'll be all right." The woman blinked slowly, her expression softening. She tried to lift her hand again, and this time Caleb gently held it so she wouldn't strain herself. He felt how weak her fingers were, how dry her skin had become. He wondered how long she had been walking alone in this heat. Had she lost her way? Was she searching for someone? Was she part of a traveling group that got separated? She whispered again, her voice small but filled with determination. "I must find my brother." Her eyes filled with fear but also strength. It was clear she had not been wandering for nothing. She had a purpose, something important enough for her to walk through the desert alone. Caleb looked around, scanning the endless land. He saw no tracks nearby, no footprints, nothing but dry earth and scattered stones. If she had been searching for someone out here, she had likely covered a long distance already, and the heat was nearly unbearable even for him, and he was strong, rested, and prepared. She must have pushed herself far beyond her limit. "You need to get out of the sun first," Caleb said gently. "Your brother won't be found if you get hurt. Let me help you. I won't leave you alone." The woman closed her eyes, as if relieved by his words. She seemed to trust him, not fully yet, but enough to let him help. Caleb lifted her carefully and placed her in the shade cast by Dusty's body. The horse stood still, understanding the situation in his quiet, animal way. Caleb supported her back, helping her sit upright against his saddlebag so she could breathe better. Her breathing slowed, becoming calmer. The color in her face softened from deep red to a more natural shade. She opened her eyes again and looked at Caleb with gratitude. Though she was still weak, there was a spark of life returning to her gaze. Caleb smiled softly, relieved to see her condition improving. "Don't worry," he said in a calm voice. "You're safe now. We'll get through this, one step at a time." The woman exhaled shakily, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from hope. And as the burning desert sun continued to glare down on everything around them, a strange sense of comfort settled between them. Neither of them knew what the next hours or days would bring, but one thing was clear. They had crossed paths for a reason, and their journey together was only just beginning. Caleb stayed close beside the young Apache woman as she slowly recovered her strength. The shade from Dusty, the slow sips of water, and the cool touches on her skin were helping her stabilize. But she was still weak, and the desert sun was still unforgiving. Caleb knew they could not stay in that spot for long. If the heat shifted or the wind changed, the area could become even hotter. He needed to get her to a safer place, a spot with real shade, water, and softer ground. The nearest spring he knew of was still an hour and a half away if he moved carefully. The woman opened her eyes again and looked at him with a mix of exhaustion and determination. She wanted to stand on her own, but when she tried, her legs wobbled and she fell back into Caleb's arms. He caught her gently and said, "Easy. You're not ready to walk yet." She closed her eyes in frustration. She was someone who clearly didn't like being weak, but Caleb spoke calmly, trying to comfort her without pushing too hard. There's no shame in needing help. The heat can break even the strongest person. She didn't answer, but she didn't resist his support either. Caleb lifted her slowly, careful not to cause her any pain. Dusty lowered his head as if understanding that he needed to be steady. Caleb placed the woman sideways on the saddle, making sure she was comfortable and safe. He tied his coat behind her to create more shade and placed a folded blanket between her and the saddle so she would not feel the wooden frame digging into her. Once she was secure, Caleb took Dusty's reins and began walking beside the horse. He made sure to stay close in case she felt dizzy again. The desert floor was bright, almost blinding. The sand reflected the sunlight like polished glass. Every few minutes, Caleb looked up to check the sun's position. He needed to reach the spring before it moved too far west and the temperatures dropped suddenly, which could also harm someone already weakened. The woman watched him quietly as he walked. She noticed the way he kept checking on her, the way he shielded her from the sun with his hat whenever the light fell directly on her face, and the way he spoke to Dusty in a low, calming voice. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, that he was helping her so carefully, or that he was doing it without expecting anything in return. After some time, she managed to speak, her voice still soft and thin. "Why, help me." Caleb glanced up at her and gave a small smile. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And I couldn't just leave you there." The woman looked down at her hands, thinking about his answer. She had grown up hearing many stories about cowboys, some good, some bad, but she had never heard of one walking for miles beside his horse just to protect a stranger. The wind blew lightly now, bringing a bit of relief. Caleb loosened the string around his water canteen and held it up to her lips again. She drank slowly, careful not to take too much at once. Caleb asked in a gentle voice, "What's your name?" She hesitated for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him completely. Then she finally said, "Nayeli." The name suited her, strong, graceful, and filled with quiet determination. Caleb nodded. "That's a beautiful name." "And you?" she asked. "Caleb," he replied. She repeated his name softly, almost testing how it sounded. It seemed unusual to her tongue, but she didn't dislike it. As they continued across the desert, Caleb noticed her breathing had become steadier. Her color was improving too, though she still looked tired. He decided to keep the pace slow. The last thing he wanted was for her to faint again. The desert around them was vast and empty, except for the occasional cactus or lonely patch of dry grass. The sounds were few, just the crunch of Dusty's hooves and the soft wind brushing past. After almost an hour, Nayeli tried to sit up straighter, holding on to the saddle horn with weak hands. Caleb immediately moved closer. "Careful," he warned. She nodded but didn't lie back. She wanted to show she was recovering. Caleb respected her spirit, but he hoped she understood that she didn't have to prove anything. As they walked, Nayeli spoke again, her voice stronger this time. "I was looking for my brother." Caleb listened closely. "Is he lost?" She swallowed and nodded. "There was a storm. He ran ahead, and the wind took away all the tracks. I followed, but the heat." Her voice broke slightly, and she looked away as if she didn't want him to see her worry. Caleb's expression changed. He felt a new weight settle in his heart. He realized that Nayeli had pushed herself to the edge because she cared deeply about her younger brother. She wasn't wandering without reason. She was searching with hope. He walked beside Dusty for a moment in silence, thinking about how to comfort her without giving false promises. Then he said softly, "We'll look for him. But first, you need strength. You can't help him if you're not well." Nayeli closed her eyes and nodded slowly. She knew he was right, even if her heart wanted to keep searching immediately. Caleb's steady presence calmed her. She could feel his sincerity in each word he said. As they approached a small rise in the land, Caleb spotted something that gave him a bit of relief: the spring. It wasn't large, but it was enough to drink from, enough for shade, enough to rest properly. Palm-like trees and tall bushes surrounded the water, creating a natural shield from the sun. Caleb pointed toward it and said, "We're almost there." When they reached the spring, Caleb helped Naeli down carefully. Her legs were still unsteady, so he kept an arm behind her back to guide her toward the soft grass near the water's edge. She sat down slowly, breathing in the cool air that hung around the spring. The sound of trickling water felt soothing after the long, hot silence of the desert. Caleb filled his hands with water and let it run gently over Nayeli's wrists and neck. She closed her eyes in relief. He then cupped the water again and offered it to her to drink. She drank slowly, but gratefully. After a few minutes, Caleb soaked a piece of cloth from his saddlebag and placed it lightly on her forehead. She whispered, "Thank you." Her voice carried both gratitude and surprise, as if she still couldn't believe someone had come to her rescue. Caleb sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to help if she needed anything. He watched the ripples on the spring's surface and said quietly, "You're safe now. Rest as long as you need. When you're ready, we'll talk about finding your brother." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes softer than before. She saw the sand stuck to his boots, the sweat on his brow, the tired look in his eyes from walking beside his horse under the sun. He had done all that for her without knowing anything about her. It made her heart feel strange, warm, steady, and less afraid. The desert felt distant now. The fear felt lighter. And as the cool wind touched her skin, Nayeli realized something unexpected. She trusted this cowboy. She trusted him more than she ever thought she would trust a stranger. She leaned back against the tree behind her, feeling safe for the first time in days. Caleb didn't know it yet, but his quiet kindness had already changed the course of her journey. And the desert, which moments ago felt like a place of danger and loneliness, now felt like the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both of them needed. Caleb stayed beside Nayeli for a long time, giving her space to breathe and regain her strength. The spring shade wrapped around them like a cool blanket, and the soft sound of water running over the stones helped calm her nerves. Little by little, the burning heat inside her chest faded, and her hands stopped shaking. Even though she was still tired, she felt far better than she had in the open desert. After some time, she opened her eyes and looked around, taking in the sight of the small oasis. The green leaves, the clear water, the gentle breeze. It felt like stepping into another world, a safe world. Caleb was sitting a short distance away, polishing his saddle straps, but his eyes lifted every few seconds to check on her. The moment she tried to sit up straighter, he noticed. "Feeling a little better?" he asked. Nayeli nodded. "Yes. The heat is not hurting anymore." "That's good." Caleb put aside his tools. "You pushed yourself too hard. But you're stronger than most folks I've known." Nayeli looked down at her hands, remembering her long journey. "I had to keep going," she said softly. "My brother is still out there. I cannot leave him alone." Caleb understood her worry. He had family once too, and though life had taken them far from him now, he remembered what it felt like to want to protect someone. He moved closer, careful not to make her uncomfortable. "We'll find him," he promised. "But first you need your strength back. Your body has been fighting the sun all day." Nayeli sighed, torn between urgency and exhaustion. She knew Caleb was right. She could not help her brother if she fainted again. She touched the cloth on her forehead, feeling how cool it was. The simple act of someone caring for her, especially a stranger, made her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. After a few more minutes, Caleb brought her a piece of dried fruit and some bread from his saddlebag. "Eat slow," he said gently. "Your stomach won't take too much at once." She ate carefully, grateful for every bite. When she finished, she looked around the oasis again, her mind growing clearer. "You said the spring was close," she said. "You knew exactly where it was." Caleb nodded. "I've been traveling this desert for years. Hunting, trading, helping ranchers move cattle. I know most paths." Nayeli studied him quietly. He had a calm, steady way of moving. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. His kindness didn't feel forced. It felt natural, as if helping others was simply part of who he was. She wondered how many people he had already helped without expecting anything in return. After his short break, Caleb stood and walked to Dusty. He took out a rope and tied a few branches together to create a wider shade area for Nayeli. She watched him work with skilled hands, moving like someone who had lived in the desert long enough to understand its dangers deeply. "Why did you stop for me?" she asked suddenly. "Most people would ride past in fear or in doubt." Caleb paused and looked at her with steady eyes. "Because no one should face the desert alone," he said simply. "Not when they're in danger, and not when they're someone's family." His words touched her more than she expected. She lowered her gaze, her eyes softening. "My brother is all I have left," she whispered. "I cannot lose him." "We won't let that happen," Caleb said. "We'll search together." Nayeli lifted her eyes again. Her trust in him grew stronger, shaped by his sincerity and actions rather than promises. She felt safer with him than she had felt in days. The sun began to lower a little, its heat softening. Caleb waited patiently until Nayeli's breathing grew stronger and her movements more stable. She stretched her fingers, testing her strength. Though she still felt tired, she no longer felt like she might collapse. Caleb filled his canteen again from the spring. "We should start soon," he said. "The desert gets harder to travel when night arrives. The cold can strike as cruelly as the heat." Nayeli nodded slowly. "I can walk," she said, trying to push herself up. But the moment she put weight on her legs, they shook. Caleb stepped forward and steadied her with gentle hands. "No rush," he said softly. "We'll take it step by step." She gave him a small, grateful nod. They stayed another 10 minutes until she finally gained enough strength to stand properly. Caleb helped her onto Dusty once more, securing her with care. Nayeli adjusted her position, feeling more stable than earlier. As they left the spring, the land opened again into wide stretches of red sand and dry brush. But this time, Nayeli didn't feel scared. Caleb walked close to Dusty, guiding him carefully and watching the horizon for any signs. The sky was turning a softer shade of blue, and long shadows stretched across the ground. After a while, Nayeli spoke again. "My brother's name is Talun," she said. "He is young. Too young to walk in the desert alone." Caleb listened carefully. "How old is he?" "Only 12, she answered, worry filling her voice again. "He went out early to look for a missing goat. The storm came fast, and I lost sight of him." Caleb nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. A boy that young in this heat, it was dangerous. But there was hope. Storms sometimes carried people across dunes, leaving tracks that could be followed if one knew how to read them. "Do you remember which direction he went?" Caleb asked gently. Nayeli pointed weakly to the west. "Toward the rocky hills." Caleb looked ahead. In the distance, dark shapes rose from the land like sleeping giants. The hills could offer shade and water, but they could also hide dangers. Still, if Talon was smart and found shelter there, he might still be safe. Caleb examined the ground as he walked. He looked for footprints, scattered stones, broken branches, anything a child might leave behind. For a long time, he found nothing but wind-blown sand. Nayeli watched him anxiously. Then, after another 20 minutes, Caleb suddenly stopped. He knelt on the ground, studying a faint mark in the sand. It was small, perhaps made by a foot. The edges were soft, as if partially erased by wind, but still visible. Nayeli leaned forward. "Is that—" "Maybe," Caleb said. "Could be a few hours old." Hope lit her eyes. "Talon." Caleb stood, scanning ahead. "The tracks seem to lead toward the hills. We keep going." Nayeli nodded, gripping the saddle horn tightly. She felt strength returning not from her body but from hope. As they moved forward, the land began to change. The ground became firmer. Small stones appeared, then larger ones. The wind grew cooler. Caleb looked around carefully. He could tell they were entering a path often used by animals seeking water. "Good sign," he said. "If Talon followed this path, he might have found a safe spot." Nayeli exhaled a shaky breath. "Please, let him be safe." Caleb placed a steady hand on Dusty's neck and said, "We'll find him." The sky was growing orange now. Shadows deepened. The air cooled. The desert shifted from burning heat to quiet evening silence. The rocky hills stood tall ahead of them, dark and mysterious. But they also held a promise of clues, of shelter, of hope. Nayeli watched the hills and whispered her brother's name softly under her breath. Caleb's step grew firmer, his eyes sharp, his heart focused. The search was just beginning. And neither of them knew that what they would discover in those hills would change their journey in ways they never expected. The rocky hills rose taller with every step they took. Evening light stretched across the ground, painting the stones with soft gold and deep orange. The desert was quiet now, almost too quiet, and every quiet moment made Nayeli more anxious. She held the saddle horn tightly, her eyes scanning every shadow, every curve in the rocks, hoping to catch even the smallest sign of her younger brother. Caleb walked ahead, guiding Dusty carefully as the path became uneven. He kept his eyes trained on the ground, hoping for a fresh trail or anything that might give them a direction. The rocks blocked the wind, and the air grew still around them. Every few minutes, Caleb paused, bending down to study the earth, the stray leaves and the small patches of disturbed dust, hoping to find clues hidden in the landscape. Nayeli leaned forward slightly, her voice trembling. "Do you see anything?" "Not yet," Caleb answered steadily. "But we're close to where the tracks were leading. Don't lose hope." Nayeli tried to calm herself. She reminded herself that Talon was brave and smart. He had learned many survival skills from their elders, and he knew how to find shade and water. But he was still young, and the desert was unpredictable. She feared he might be scared, hungry, or hurt. The thought made her heart squeeze painfully. As they moved deeper into the hills, Caleb noticed faint marks along the ground, broken twigs, stones pushed aside, and footprints too small to belong to a grown man. He kneeled again, brushing his hand gently over one of the marks. "These look fresh," he murmured. "Maybe a few hours old." Nayeli felt her breath catch. "Talon?" Caleb nodded. "There's a good chance. See how shallow the steps are? Lightweight. A child." She pressed her hand against her mouth, overwhelmed by relief. For a moment she felt herself growing dizzy again, but she steadied her breath. Caleb stood and looked around. "He's close. We just have to follow the trails carefully now." The rocks created natural pathways and narrow corridors, almost like small canyons. Some areas were shaded and cool, while others still held the day's heat. Caleb guided Dusty around large boulders and through tight spaces where the horse had to squeeze carefully. They had moved only a short distance deeper when Dusty suddenly lifted his ears and stopped. The horse stood still, listening to something neither of them could hear yet. Caleb paused, holding up a hand. "What is it?" Nayeli whispered. "Dusty hears something," Caleb said. They stayed absolutely quiet. After a moment, Nayeli heard it too, a faint sound, like a small cough or a soft cry carried on the wind. Her heart jumped. "Talon!" she gasped. Caleb didn't waste a second. He hurried ahead, weaving through the narrow, rocky path. Nayeli held tightly as Dusty followed him swiftly, his hooves echoing softly against the stone walls. As they turned a corner, the sound grew clearer. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably human. Caleb's pace quickened. The next curve in the path opened into a small, natural hollow surrounded by tall rocks. There, sitting near a fallen tree trunk, was a young boy with messy hair, tired eyes, and a scraped ankle. Nayeli's breath broke into a trembling sob. "Talon!" she cried. The boy looked up sharply. When he saw her riding toward him, his face lit up with shock and relief. "Nayeli!" he shouted, trying to stand but stumbling back down in pain. Caleb reached him first and knelt beside him. "Easy, son," he said kindly. "You're safe now." Nayeli slid off Dusty with Caleb's help and hurried to her brother. She wrapped her arms around him tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. Talon leaned into her, hugging her back with equal strength. "I got scared," he said softly. "The storm came fast. I tried to follow the goat, but I couldn't see. And then I fell." Nayeli pulled back to check him. His ankle was swollen, his face dusty, but he was alive and safe. She breathed a long, shaky sigh of relief and pressed her forehead gently against his. Caleb stepped back, letting them share their moment, his heart lightening at the sight. After a few minutes, Caleb examined Talon's ankle. "It's not broken," he said, "but he twisted it pretty badly. He won't be able to walk far." Talon looked up at him, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for helping my sister," he said quietly. Caleb smiled warmly. "You've got a brave sister. She walked through the desert for you." Nayeli brushed Talon's hair back gently. "I would walk forever for you," she said softly. Caleb prepared a small splint from sticks and cloth he carried. He tied it around the boy's ankle to support it. Talon winced but didn't complain. Caleb nodded approvingly. "You're tough," he said. After securing the ankle, Caleb lifted Talon carefully and placed him on Dusty's back, right in front of Nayeli. She wrapped her arms around him to keep him steady. Talon leaned against her, comforted by her warmth. The sky was turning a deep orange, and the temperature was starting to drop. Caleb knew they needed to leave the rocky hills soon. The night desert could be dangerously cold, and Talon needed proper shelter. "We should head toward your village," Caleb said. "You'll be safer there, and Talon needs rest." Nayeli nodded. "I know the way from the open desert. Once we leave the hills, I can guide us." They began their journey back, moving slowly because of the uneven ground and the growing darkness. Caleb stayed close to Dusty, looking back often to check on Talon. The boy was tired, but he stayed awake, holding tightly to his sister. Nayeli hummed a soft tune from their childhood, trying to keep him calm. After they reached flatter ground, the land opened into wide desert once again. A cool breeze brushed across their faces. Caleb wrapped Talon in one of his blankets to keep him warm. The boy smiled weakly and whispered, "Thank you." "You're welcome," Caleb replied gently. They walked for nearly an hour before they finally saw signs of life ahead, soft lights flickering from a distant camp and smoke rising from cooking fires. Nayeli pointed with a trembling hand. "That's home," she said. "Our village." Talon lifted his head slightly, relief washing over him. "We made it." Caleb felt a strange warmth grow in his chest. He hadn't expected to find himself guiding two siblings through the desert, yet here he was, feeling more connected to them than he could explain. When they reached the village's edge, several figures rushed out, shouting Nayeli's and Talun's names. The moment they saw the children safe, tears and gasps filled the air. Nayeli's mother ran forward, her hands shaking, and pulled both her children into her arms, thanking the spirits for bringing them back. But when her eyes lifted to Caleb, she froze, not in fear, but in surprise. His dusty clothes, his tired face, the careful way he stood beside the horse. It told her everything she needed to know. Nayeli stepped between them and said, her voice strong and clear, "He saved us. Both of us." Caleb lowered his head respectfully. He hadn't done it for thanks, but the warmth in their eyes touched him deeply. The villagers gathered, whispering in awe at the cowboy who had guided their children home. Talun looked up at Caleb and said quietly, "You're my hero." Caleb felt embarrassed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just did what was right," he said. But inside, he knew this day had changed something in him, something he didn't fully understand yet. And the night, cool and peaceful now, wrapped around them like a gentle reminder that their journey wasn't over. Night settled over the village slowly, like a soft blanket covering the desert. The sky began filling with stars one by one, and the warm lights from the small adobe homes glowed gently across the camp. Caleb stood quietly near Dusty, giving Nayeli and her family time to reunite. He felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came after doing something that truly mattered. Nayeli's mother held Talon close, checking his hands, face, and swollen ankle again and again, as if she needed to be sure he was really there in front of her. Talon leaned into her arms, exhausted but safe. Other villagers surrounded them, expressing their relief and whispering blessings for the children's return. When her mother finally let go of the children, she turned her full attention to Caleb. Her eyes were a mixture of gratitude and emotion. She stepped toward him, her posture strong but respectful. "You brought back my children," she said softly, but every word carried deep meaning. "I owe you more than I can ever say." Caleb shook his head lightly. "I just helped them find their way home. Anyone would have done the same." But Nayeli, standing beside her mother, knew the truth. Not everyone would have walked miles under the burning sun. Not everyone would have given water, shade, strength, and comfort to a stranger. Not everyone would risk the desert night just to return two children safely to their family. She stepped forward slowly and looked into Caleb's eyes. "No," she said gently. "Not everyone would do what you did." Caleb met her gaze, noticing how calm and steady she looked. She was no longer the weak, heat-stricken woman he had rescued earlier. She stood with strength again. Her true strength, the kind that came from love, loyalty, and courage. Several villagers approached Caleb and bowed their heads respectfully. One of the elders offered him a woven blanket, decorated with patterns that told stories of their ancestors. Caleb accepted it humbly, touched by the gesture. He knew what such a gift represented: respect, trust, gratitude. Talon, wrapped in one of Caleb's blankets, lifted his hand and motioned for the cowboy to come closer. Caleb crouched beside him, looking gently into the boy's tired eyes. "Thank you," Talon whispered, his voice soft but full of meaning. "When I was sitting alone in the rocks, I was scared. But when I heard your voice and Nayeli calling my name, I wasn't scared anymore." Caleb smiled softly. "You were brave, Talun. You kept trying to stay safe. That helped us find you." Talon nodded slowly, his eyes shining. Then, in a quiet voice filled with admiration, he said, "You're part of our family now." Caleb's breath caught for a moment. He didn't expect such words from the young boy. Nayeli heard them too, and her eyes softened as she looked at Caleb. She didn't say anything right away, but her expression showed she agreed with her brother. The chief of the village arrived shortly after, an older man with wise eyes and a calm presence. He walked slowly toward Caleb, carrying a carved wooden staff. When he reached the cowboy, he extended his hand. "You have done what many talk about, but few do," the chief said. "You walked beside danger to protect life. For that, we honor you." Caleb shook his hand respectfully. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. The chief nodded. "You may rest here tonight as our guest. You will have food, warmth, and safety." Caleb agreed with a small nod. He didn't want to impose, but the desert night was cold, and Dusty needed rest too. Besides, he wanted to make sure Talon's ankle was stable before leaving. Nayeli led Caleb to a small spot near the fire pit where the villagers sat to eat. The warm glow flickered across their faces, casting soft shadows. Someone handed Caleb a bowl of stew. He sat down carefully, feeling more welcomed than he had felt in a long time. As they ate, children in the village whispered excitedly about the cowboy who had brought Talon home. Adults spoke in low tones about Caleb's bravery, but Caleb didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had simply done the right thing. Nayeli sat beside him after helping her brother settle down inside one of the huts. She didn't speak immediately. She watched the fire, her thoughts deep and quiet. After a while, she said, "Today could have ended very differently." Her voice was calm, but emotion lingered under her words. "If you had not found me, if you had not helped me, Talon might still be alone." Caleb turned his head slightly to look at her. "I'm glad I got there in time." She looked down at her hands. "I never expected help from a stranger, especially not from someone you would call a cowboy." She gave a small smile. "But you were kind. You were patient. You treated me with respect." Caleb stared at the fire, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being thanked so deeply. He finally said, "You're strong, Nayeli. Even when you were hurting, you fought to stay awake. You kept trying to move. You didn't give up." Nayeli glanced at him with warm eyes. "I stayed awake because I believed someone would help me. I didn't know who, but I'm glad it was you." Her words settled gently between them. Caleb felt an unexpected warmth expand in his chest. It wasn't just relief or gratitude. It was something softer, something he didn't dare name yet. Later that night, as the village quieted and children slept safely inside their homes, Caleb sat under the open sky. Dusty grazed quietly nearby. The stars shone brighter than ever, scattered across the darkness like diamonds. Nayeli walked toward him, wrapped in a light shawl. She stood beside him without saying anything at first, looking up at the same sky. "It is beautiful tonight," she said softly. "It is," Caleb agreed. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You are leaving in the morning?" Caleb nodded slowly. "I should. I have work waiting for me, people depending on me." Nayeli looked down for a moment, her fingers gripping the shawl. "My family is grateful. My brother is grateful. She paused, searching for the right words. "I am grateful in ways I cannot explain." Caleb felt something shift inside him. He cleared his throat gently. "You don't need to thank me anymore. I was glad to help." Nayeli smiled softly. "I know, but some things deserve to be said more than once." The two of them stood in comfortable silence, listening to the distant crackle of the remaining fire. A cool breeze moved around them, carrying the scent of earth and the quiet promise of safety. At last, Nayeli whispered, "You changed our lives today." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and something deeper. "No matter where you go, we will remember you. My family will always open the door to you." Caleb felt emotions swell in his chest. He nodded quietly. Thank you. That means a lot. When dawn finally touched the edge of the sky, Caleb prepared to leave. The village awoke early. Talon limped over with a bright smile. Nayeli stood beside her mother, watching Caleb with warm eyes. Talon hugged him tightly and said, "Come back someday." Caleb smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I will." Nayeli stepped forward. She didn't speak grand words. She only said with quiet honesty, "Travel safely, and may the desert be kind to you." Caleb tipped his hat, mounted Dusty, and began his journey back across the golden desert. But he carried something new with him, something unexpected, something precious, a memory he would cherish forever. And as the village faded behind him, Nayeli watched him ride away, knowing her life, her brother's life, and her family's future had been changed by the courage and kindness of a stranger who had simply refused to leave them behind.